Hi, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Pickering, and we're going to continue with Julie of the Wolves. But I'm going to be making a Zoom recording every 10 pages so that those that would like to listen as I read to them will be able to, with their books, read along and listen. And periodically, I'll stop if there are any, if there seem to be any questions or things I want to clarify for you. Um, I'm going to do a summary, and you'll be able to read that on Google Classroom of part one, which was Amarok the Wolf, where we learned about Miax and her desperate predicament and needing to be fed by the wolves and become a member eventually of their pack. I think you remember that at the end of part one, Miax woke up, said to Amarok, "I'm ready when you are," and the pack had already left. Because we remember that word, they're nomadic by nature, and they're going to follow the food. The second part is titled Miax the Girl. So we're going to have a lot of questions answered about Miax in this section. But one of the things I wanted to clarify with you before we begin the reading is that this whole section is a, a flashback. So at the end of part one, we'd say that Miax was probably about 12 or 13 years old. At the beginning of this, she is scarcely 4, so she's just a little child. And the section will end when she's 11 or when she's 12 or 13. So that math is important to you to understand part of her journey. So I'm going to show you the picture on the inside. Hold on. Whoops. Okay, typical. There we go. There we go. You folks, I'm hoping can see that picture. And if you look at it, you're going to notice that there's the ocean and there are rocks and there's a little girl on her father's shoulder. And they have come all the way from Macoriac, all the way to Seal Camp, which is about 75 or 80 miles along the coast. And if you looked at the map of Nunivak Island, just think of it going to the left and around, okay? That's a beautiful picture. And let's see, let's start reading. And remember, this is going back in time. And at the end of this, I'm going to be asking you, why do you think Jean Craighead George wrote it that way? Okay, so let's begin. And we're going to read today pages 75 to 85. So let's begin. Okay. The empty sky. Let me start again. Sorry. The wind, the empty sky, the deserted earth. Miax had felt the bleakness of being left behind once before. She could not remember her mother very well, for Miax was scarcely 4 when she died, but she did remember the day of her death. The wind was screaming wild high notes and hurling ice-filled waves against the beach. Capuchin was holding her hand and they were walking. When she stumbled, he put her on his shoulders, and high above the beach she saw thousands of birds diving toward the sea. The Yagar screamed and the sandpipers cried. The feathered horns of the comical puffins drooped low, and Capuchin told her they seemed to be grieving with him. Sorry. Okay. She saw this, but she was not sad. She was divinely happy going somewhere alone with Capuchin. Well, occasionally, he climbed the cliffs and brought her eggs to eat. Occasionally, he took her in his arms and leaned against a rock. She slept at times in the warmth of his big sealskin parka. Then they walked on. She did not know how far. Later, Capuchin's Aunt Martha told her that he had lost his mind the day her mother died. He had grabbed up Miax and walked out of his fine house in Macoriac. He left his important job as manager of the reindeer herd, and he had left all of his possessions. He walked all the way with you to SEAL camp, Martha told her, and he never did anything good after that. To Miax, the years at SEAL camp were infinitely good. The scenes and the events were beautiful color spots in her memory. I'm going to stop for a minute, boys and girls, because the idea that her memories are wonderful, are color spots, is a metaphor. But this is a different metaphor than you've seen before. It's what's called an extended metaphor because it goes for several pages. Okay, so I'll read that again. The scenes and events were beautiful color spots in her memory. There was Capugin's little house of driftwood not far from the beach. It was rosy gray on the outside. Inside it was gold brown. Walrus tusks gleamed, and drums, harpoons, and man's knives decorated the walls. The sealskin kayak beside the door glowed as if the moon had been stretched across its graceful ribs, shone black. Dark gold and soft brown were the old men who sat with Capugin's camp stove and talked to him by night and day. The ocean was green and white and was rimmed with fur, for she saw it through Capugin's hood as she rode to sea with him on the back inside the parka. Through this frame, she saw the soft eyes of the seals on the ice. Capugin's back would grow taut, tight, as he lifted his arms and fired his gun. Then the ice would turn red. The celebration of the Blatterfest was many colors, black, blue, purple, fire red, but Capugin's hand around hers was rose-colored, and that was the color of her memory of the feast. A shaman, an old priestess whom everyone called the Bent Woman, danced. Her face was streaked with black soot. When she finally bowed, a fiery spirit came out of the dark wearing a huge mask that jingled and terrified Miax. Once in sheer bravery, she peeked up under a mask and saw that the dancer was not a spirit at all, but Naka, Capugin's serious partner. She whispered his name and he laughed, took off his mask and sat down beside Capugin. They talked and the old men joined them. Oops, sorry. Later that day, Capuchin blew up seal bladders, and he and the old men carried them out to the ice. There they dropped them into the sea while Miax watched and listened to their songs. When she came back to camp, the Bent Woman told her that the men had returned the bladders to the seal. Now, this was part of the Inuit tradition of praising the animal that sacrificed its life for them. Bladders hold the spirits of the animal, she said. Now the spirits can enter the bodies of the newborn seals and keep them until we are safe, keep them safe until we harvest them again. That night, the Bent Woman seemed all violet colored as she tied a piece of seal fur and blubber to Miax's belt. It's an Inigotied, she said. It's a nice little spirit for you. Another memory was flickering yellow. It was of the old men beating their drums around Capugin's stove. She saw them through a scarf of tiny crystals that was her breath on the cold night air inside the house. Naka and Capuchin were on their hands and knees, prancing lightly and moving swiftly. When Naka tapped Capuchin's chin with his head, Capuchin rose to his knees. He threw back his head, then rocked back on his heels. Naka sat up, and together they sang the song of the wolves. When the dance was over, the old men cheered and beat the paddle like drums. "You are wolves, you are real wolves," they cried. After that, Capuchin told her about the wolves he had known on the mainland when he went to high school in Nome. He and his joking friends, would hunt the wilderness for months, calling to the wolves, speaking their language to ask where the game was. When they were successful, they returned to Nome with sled loads of caribou. "Wolves are brotherly," he had said. "They love each other, and if you learn to speak to them, they will love you too." He told her that the birds and animals all have languages, and if you listen and watch them, you could learn about their enemies, where their food lay, and when big storms were coming. A silver memory was the day when the sun came over the horizon for the first time in the winter. He was at the beach, close to Capuchin, helping him haul in a huge gleaming net. It was a beautiful white whale. Out of sight of the other, out of sight on the other side of the whale, she could hear the old men as they cheered this gift from the sea. The whale was a mountain so high she could not see the cliffs beyond, only the sunlit clouds. Capugin's huge black frostbitten hand seemed small as it touched the great body of the whale. Not far from them, not far away, the bent woman was dancing and gathering invisible things from the air. Miax was frightened, but Capuchin explained that she was putting the spirit of the whale in her indigo tear. She will return it to the sea and the whales, he said. Walking the tundra with Capuchin was all laughter and fun. He would hail the blue sky and shout out his praise for the grasses and bushes. On these trips, they ate salmon berries. They lay in the sun watching the birds. Sometimes Capuchin would whisper sandpiper songs, and the birds would dip down to see which of their members had gotten lost in the grass. When they saw him and darted away, Capuchin would laugh. Fishing was murky tan in her memory, for they would wade out to the river mouth where the stone weirs were built and drive the fish into nets between the walls. Capuchin would spear them or grab them in his hand and throw them in to the men in the wooden boats. Occasionally he skimmed after the biggest cod and halibut in his kayak, and he would whoop with joy when he caught one and would hold it above his head. It gleamed as it twisted in the sun. Summers at Sail Camp were not as beautiful to Miax as the autumns and winters, but during this time, many families came to Nash Harbor to hunt from Macoriac, came to Nash Harbor to hunt and fish, and Capuchin was very busy. Sometimes he helped people set nets, sometimes he scoured the ocean in his kayaks as he searched for seal colonies. During these hours, Miax was left with the other children on the beach. She played tag and grass ball with them, and she pried open prickly sea urchins off the rocks to eat with the sweet meat inside. Often she dug for clams, and when Capuchin returned, he would crack them open and smack his lips as he swallowed them whole. The Eskimos from Macoriac spoke English almost all the time. They called her father Charlie Edwards, and Miax was Julie, for they all had two names, Eskimo in English. Her mother had also called her Julie, so she did not mind her summer name until one day when Capuchin called her that. She stamped her foot and told him her name was Miax. I am Eskimo, not a Gusak, she said, and he tossed her into the air and hugged her to him. Yes, you are Eskimo, he said, and never forget it. We live as no other people can, for we truly understand the earth. But winters always return. Blizzards came and the temperatures dropped to 30 and 40 below zero. And those who stayed at hunting camps spoke only in Eskimo and did only Eskimo things. They scraped hides, mended boots, made boats, carved walrus tusks. In the evening, Capuchin sang and danced with the old men, and all of their songs and dances were about the sea and the land and the creatures that dwelled there. One year, probably in September, for the canvas tents were down and the campground almost empty, Capuchin came into the house with a seal skin. It was a seal harbor, but had so few spots on it that it was a rare prize. We must make you a new coat, he said. You're getting big. Since your mother is not here to help us, I will do her work. Now watch and learn. The skin was metallic silver gold and so beautiful that even the velveteen parkas of the children from Macoriac paled by comparison. Miak stroked it lovingly as Capuchin lay her old coat upon it and began to cut a larger one. As he worked, he hummed, and she made up words about the seals who wanted to become a coat. Presently, they became aware of the distant throb of a motorboat. The sound grew louder and then shut off at the beach. Footsteps crunched, the cold air rushed in the door, and there was Martha, Capuchin's aunt. She was thin and her face was pinched. Miax disliked her immediately, but was spared the necessity of speaking nicely to her, for Martha had words for only Capuchin. She talked swiftly in English. When Miax barely understood, she was angry and upset. Martha shook her finger at Capuchin and glanced at Miax from time to time. The two were arguing very loudly when Martha pulled a sheet of paper from her pocket and showed it to Capuchin. No, he shouted. We'll see, Martha screamed, turned around, and went toward the boat where a white man waited. Capuchin followed her and stood by the boat, talking to the man for a long time. The next morning, Miax was awakened as Capuchin lifted her up in his arms and held her close. Gently, he pushed the hair out of her eyes and, speaking softly in Eskimo, told her she was going to live with Aunt Martha. There's a law that says you must go to school, and I guess you should. You are 9 years old, and I must go to war. The government is fighting somewhere. Boys and girls, this would have been the Vietnam War, based by the time. Miax grabbed him around the neck, but did not protest. It never occurred to her that anything that Capuchin decided was not absolutely perfect. She whimpered, however. Listen closely, he said. If anything happens to me, and if you are unhappy, when you are 13, you can leave Aunt Martha by marrying Daniel, Naka's son. Naka is going to Barrow on the Arctic Ocean. I shall make arrangements with him. He is like me, an old-time Eskimo who likes our traditions. He will agree. Miax listened carefully. Then he put her down and hastily packed her bladder bag, wrapped her in an oilskin against the wild spray of the sea, and carried her to the boat. She sat down beside Martha and stared bravely at Capuchin. The motor started, and Capuchin looked at her until the boat moved. Then he turned his back and walked quickly away. The launch sped up, a huge wave slammed down into a foaming trough, and Capuchin was no longer visible. With that, Miax became Julie. She was given a cot near the door in Martha's little house, now they're in Macoriac, and was soon walking to school into the darkness. She liked to learn the printed English words and books, and so a month passed rather happily. One morning when the air was cold and the puddles around the house were solid ice, an old man from SEAL camp arrived at the door. He spoke softly to Martha, then pulled his hood tightly around his face and went away. Martha came to Miax's bed. Your father went seal hunting in that ridiculous kayak. He has been gone a month this day. He will not be back. Bits of his kayak washed up on the shore. Martha stumped to the fire and turned her back. Julie ran out of the house into the dark morning. She darted past the store, the reindeer packing house, the church. She did not stop until she came to the beach. There she crouched among the oil drums and looked out at the sea on the sea. The wind blew across the water, shattering the tips of the waves and shooting ice sparklets north of the storm. Capuchin, she called. No one answered. Capuchin was gone. The earth was empty and bleak. Okay, boys and girls, that stops the reading that ends the reading that we're going to do right now. There's a lot to think about in that reading. You've met Capuchin as a young father. You know that Julie Miax was scarcely 4 when her mother died. We never find out why, we just know she died. Taken to SEAL camp, remained there for close to 5 years with her father and loving it. And then at 9, Aunt Martha comes to take her, saying that she needs to be going to school. But keep reading because I'm going to be doing another segment, and I will have questions posted about this reading. Any confusion you have at all, please email me directly, and I can address that at the next time we read. I want you to pick your, I'll write this as an assignment, so don't worry about remembering it. But I want you to pick your favorite color spot. And I would like you to draw a picture of it using your markers or your Crayola pencils. And if you don't feel like doing a piece of art, I'd like you to write a haiku. And of course, the best would be to do a haiku and do your picture with it. So boys and girls, thank you. I hope the reading was paced enough for you to listen to and follow along. And I hope you we're off into the next adventure. And we're going to find out what Aunt Martha's real motives were for taking Miax away. Okay, have a nice night, boys and girls. It's Sunday night while I'm doing this, and we'll be in touch soon. Bye-bye.